Sophie has the great misfortune of being the eldest of three daughters, destined to fail miserably should she ever leave home and to seek her fate. But when she unwittingly attracts the ire of the Witch of the Waste, Sophie finds herself under a horrid spell that transforms her into an old lady. Her only chance at breaking it lies in the ever-moving castle in the hills, the wizard Howl's castle. To untangle the enchantment, Sophie must handle the heartless Howl, strike a bargain with a fire demon, and meet the Witch of the Waste head-on. Along the way, she discovers that there's far more to Howl and herself than first meets the eye. Chapter 1, in which Sophie talks to hats. In the land of Angry, where such things as 7-league boots and cloaks of invisibility really exist, it is quite a misfortune to be born the eldest of three. Everyone knows you are the one who will fail first, and worst if the three of you set out to seek your fortune. Mrs. Fairfax was a great dear and uses honey with everything. She keeps bees. That was all Sophie heard of her sisters for quite a while, because she started her own apprenticeship the day Martha and Letty left. Sophie, of course, knew the hat trade quite well already. Since she was a tiny child, she had run in and out of the big work shed across the yard, where the hats were damp and molded on blocks, and flowers and fruit and other trimmings were made from wax and silk. She knew the people who worked there. Most of them had been there when her father was a boy. She knew Bessie, the only one remaining shop assistant. She knew the customers who bought the hats and the man who drove the cart which fetched raw straw hats in from the country to be shaped on the blocks in the shed. She knew the other suppliers and how you made felt for winter hats. There was not really much that Fanny could teach her, except perhaps the best way to get a customer to buy a hat. "You lead up to the right hat, love," Fanny said. "Show them the ones that won't quite do at first, so they know the difference as soon as they put the right one on." In fact, Sophie did not sell hats very much. After a day or so observing in the work shed, and another day going round the clothier and the silk merchants with Fanny set out to trimming her hats. Sophie sat in a small alcove at the back of the shop, sewing roses and bonnets and veiling to velours, lining all of them with silk and arranging wax fruit and ribbons stylishly on the outsides. She was good at it. She quite liked doing it, but she felt isolated and a little dull. The workplace shop people were too old to be much fun, and, besides, they treated her as someone a part of who's going to inherit the business someday. Bessie treated her the same way. Bessie's only talk anyway was about the farmer she was going to marry the week after May Day. Sophie rather envied Fanny, who could bustle off to bargain with the silk merchant whatever she wanted. The most interesting thing was the talk from the customers. Nobody can buy a hat without gossiping. Sophie sat in her alcove and stitched and heard that the mayor never would eat green vegetables, that the wizard Howl's castle had moved around to the cliffs again. Really, that man, whisper, whisper, whisper. The voices were always dropped low when they talked of Wizard Howl, but Sophie gathered that he caught a girl down the valley last month. "Bluebeard," said the whispers, and then became voices again to say that Jane Ferrier was a perfect disgrace, the way she did her hair. That was the one who would never attract even Wizard Howl, let alone a respectable man. Then there would be a fleeting, fearful whisper about the Witch of the Waste. Sophie began to feel that Wizard Howl and the Witch of the Waste should get together. They seemed to be made for one another. Someone ought to arrange a match, she remarked to the hat she was trimming at that moment. But at the end of the month, the gossip in the shop was suddenly all about Letty. Sussery's, it seemed, was packed with gentlemen from morning to night, each one buying quantities of cakes and demanding to be served by Letty. She had had 10 proposals of marriage, ranging in quality from the mayor's son to the lad who swept the streets, and she refused them all, saying she was too young to make up her mind yet. "I call that sensible of her," Sophie said to a bonnet she was pleating silk into. Fanny was pleased with this news. "I knew she'd be all right," she said happily. It occurred to Sophie that Fanny was glad Letty was no longer around. "Letty's bad for custom," she told the bonnet, pleating away at mushroom-colored silk. "She would make even you look glamorous, you dowdy old thing. Other ladies look at Letty and despair." Sophie talked to hats more and more as weeks went by. There was no one much else to talk to. Fanny was out bargaining or trying to whip up custom much of the day, and Bessie was busy serving and telling everyone her wedding plans. Sophie got into the habit of putting each hat on its stand as she finished it, where it sat looking almost like a dead head without a body, and pausing while she told the hat what the upper body ought to be like. She flattered the hats a bit because you could flatter customers, or you should flatter customers. "You have a mysterious allure," she told one that was failing all hidden twinkles. To a wide creamy hat with roses under the brim, she said, "You're going to marry money." And to a caterpillar green straw with a curly green feather, she said, "You are young as a spring leaf." She told pink bonnets they had dimpled charm, and smart hats trimmed with velvet that they were witty. She told the mushroom-pleated bonnet, "You have a heart of gold, and someone in a high position will see it and fall in love with you." This was because she was sorry for that particular bonnet. It looked so fussy and plain. Jane Ferrier had come into the shop next day and bought it. Her hair did look a little strange, Sophie thought, peeping out of her alcove, as if Jane had wound round a row of pokers. It seemed a pity she had chosen that bonnet, but everyone seemed to be buying hats and bonnets around then. Maybe it was Fanny's sales talk, or maybe it was spring coming, but the hat trade was definitely picking up. Fanny began to say a little guiltily, "I think I shouldn't have been in such a hurry to get Martha and Letty placed out. At this rate we might have managed." There was so much custom as April drew on toward May Day that Sophie had to put on a demure always thought she was nearly as strong-minded as Letty. Now she was finding that there were some things she could only do when there were no excuses left. This is absurd, Sophie said. Market Square is only 2 streets away if I run, and she swore to herself she would go around to Cecil's when the hat shop was closed for May Day. Meanwhile, a new piece of gossip came into the shop. The king had quarreled with his own brother, Prince Justin, it was said, and the prince had gone into exile. Nobody quite knew the reason for the quarrel, but the prince actually had come through market shipping in disguise a couple months back, and nobody had known. The Count of Cataract was sent by the king to look for the prince when he happened to meet Jane Ferrier instead. Sophie listened and felt sad. Interesting things did seem to happen, but always to somebody else. Still, it would be nice to see Letty. May Day came. Merrymaking filled the streets from dawn onward. Fanny went out early, but Sophie had a couple hats to finish first. Sophie sang as she worked. After all, Letty was working too. Cecil's was open till midnight on holidays. I shall buy one of their cream cakes, Sophie decided. I haven't had one for ages. She watched people crowding past the window in all kinds of bright clothes, people selling souvenirs, people walking on stilts, and felt really excited. But when she at last put on a gray shawl over her gray dress and went out into the street, Sophie did not feel excited. She felt overwhelmed. There were too many people rushing past, laughing and shouting, far too much noise and jostling. Sophie felt as if the past months of sitting and sewing had turned her into an old woman or a semi-invalid. She gathered her shawl round her and crept along close to the houses, trying to avoid being trodden on by people's best shoes or being jabbed by elbows and trailing silk sleeves. When there came a sudden volley of bangs from overhead somewhere, Sophie thought she was going to faint. She looked up and saw Wizard Howl's castle right down on the hillside above the town. So near it seemed to be sitting on the chimneys. Blue flames were shooting out of all 4 of the castle's turrets, bringing balls of blue fire with them that exploded high into the sky, quite horrendously. Wizard Howl seemed to be offended by May Day, or maybe he was trying to join in his own fashion. Sophie was too terrified to care. She would have gone home, except that she was halfway to Cecil's by then, so she ran. What made me think I wanted life to be interesting, she asked as she ran. I'm far too scared. It comes with being the eldest of 3. When she reached Market Square, it was worse, if possible. Most of the inns were in the square. Crowds of young men swaggered beerily to and fro, trailing cloaks and long sleeves and stamping buckled boots they never would have dreamed of wearing on a working day, calling loud remarks and accosting girls. The girls strolled in fine pairs, ready to be accosted. It was perfectly normal for May Day, but Sophie was scared of that too. And when a young man in a fantastical blue and silver costume spotted Sophie and decided to accost her as well, Sophie shrank into a shop doorway and tried to hide. The young man looked at her in surprise. It's all right, you little gray mouse, he said, laughing rather pityingly. I only wanted to buy you a drink. Don't look so scared. The pitying look made Sophie utterly ashamed. He was such a dashing specimen too, with a bony, sophisticated face, really quite old, well into his 20s, and elaborate blonde hair. His sleeves trailed longer than any in the square, all scalloped edges and silver insets. Oh, no thank you, if you please, sir, Sophie stammered. I'm on my way to see my sister. Then by all means do so, laughed this advanced young man. Who am I to keep a pretty lady from her sister? Would you like me to go with you, since you seem so scared? He meant it kindly, which made Sophie more ashamed than ever. No thank you, sir, she gasped and fled away past him. He wore perfume too. The smell of hyacinths followed her as she ran. What a courtly person, Sophie thought as she pushed her way between the little tables outside Cecil's. The tables were packed. Inside it was packed and as noisy as the square. Sophie located Letty among the you're so on her